In many parts of the Western world, the idea of getting rid of an inheritance tax, or the so-called death tax, is anathema to a growing number of people who feel that the rich should pay more and more and more. And yet there's one Western country that's talking about scrapping the inheritance tax altogether. To be completely honest with you, just before we start, I'm not sure that this is something that smells of it's going to happen next year, but it seems more like a, hey, we're going to get around to this eventually because we sense we're losing some power. We want to kind of shore up our voting base. And that's what's happening right now in the United Kingdom, as Rishi Sunak is considering an inheritance tax cut or even an outright abolition of the tax. Now, he is downplaying speculation on a tax reduction. And what's interesting is, before we even get into this article from our beloved Guardian, they're telling you in the subheadline how this only affects about 4% of deaths a year. And that kind of speaks exactly to why I see so many of these Western countries, like, you're not going to get rid of the inheritance tax. You're not going to continue to raise it up over time because you're going to have more and more angry people. There's like a pot of money available to us. The average person in the Western world who's never really been through anything that difficult. I understand people are going through some tough stuff, but like, compare that to the countries where I've spent time over the last 12 years. Their lives aren't that difficult. They've never really seen like, hey, how is our bread buttered here? I bet if we take everyone's wealth away, like, that's probably not going to be a way to have a great country that's growing and on the right side of things. And so the idea is, hey, if there's money that can be grabbed, it's not someone's money we're taking. It's, hey, this is 82 billion pounds per year, for example. Now, I'm going to give you a specific strategy that you can use to give yourself options, because there's two different ways we can play this. We can assume Rishi Sunak is indeed going to cut or eliminate the inheritance tax in the UK, in which case you may want to plan your affairs differently. If you live in the UK, you may want to do asset protection differently. You may want to stay in the UK versus moving, although obviously he's not getting rid of the income tax. He's not getting rid of the corporate tax, so there's still that. But if you think that, hey, this is probably not going to happen, whether it's in the UK or your country, I'm going to give you a strategy that you can use as well. Here's the article from The Guardian. Rishi Sunak is reportedly considering an inheritance tax cut as he attempts to woo voters and create dividing lines with Labour, the other party, which is comfortably ahead in the polls. The plans would make way for the eventual scrapping of the levy, Sunday Times has reported. However, Downing Street has sought to play down speculation that the Prime Minister was drawing on plans to cut the tax. Inheritance tax is charged at 40% for estates worth more than a measly £325,000, with an extra £175,000 towards a main resident if it's passed to children and grandchildren. Now, £500,000 is not nothing, but when you consider housing prices, when you consider just wages, I mean, if someone just saves some of their money, I know it's hard to save money with those high income taxes you have over there. I mean, £500,000 over the course of a lifetime. The fact that only affects 4% of people that are paying this tax seems crazy. I mean, it just shows how little money you can save, quite frankly, when your taxes are that high. Imagine you made the same income you make without the crazy taxes. A lot more people would be paying at these low inheritance tax rates. So it's kind of like the government keeps you poor as a favor. You don't get to save too much. You don't get to get too far ahead. It's a favor to you. So we don't bang you over the head on the way out. And yes, a married couple can double the allowance. So if you're married, you get £1 million. Still, two people working in this day and age. By the way, I told you about the class that I gave to our Nomad Capitalist team, and I showed them, hey, what if you just take like $100 a month and set that aside? Like, let's say you're 25. Like, let's say you take $200. Then it was like, all right, $500. Like, a lot of you can take $500 and you can set that aside. Like, you're talking, in some cases, these people could be, I mean, you'd be over £1 million. It doesn't take a lot to get there if you start right, but I guess the combination of not teaching financial literacy, the combination of high taxes, it is hard to get ahead. It's proof. That's what makes the difference. The article goes on and on and on with a lot of facts that aren't relevant to what we're talking about. Again, 3.73% of UK deaths resulted in an inheritance tax charge. Absolutely crazy. Whatever happens with this, whatever the rest of the Guardian, we don't care what the Guardian has to say. But there's a couple ways to play this. Number one, there are already places that don't have an inheritance tax. And I will tell you, it is marketed. When I see things like citizenship by investment, residence by investment, you'll often see, they say, oh, no inheritance tax. Now, that would generally apply if you live there. You know, simply getting citizenship in a country that has no inheritance tax is not like some kind of shield that keeps the dragons away. you would need to kind of live there and kind of properly exit the country that you're living in now. So the first option is, if you live in the UK and you're like, yeah, all right, they're not even agreeing. The guy is ostensibly the low tax guy. He's not even agreeing publicly that they're talking about this. It will still be a hurdle to get it through. And even if they were to get it through as it lasts forever, why don't we go to the country where they've never had an inheritance tax? And that could apply to you no matter where you live. If you live in a country that has an inheritance tax, there is some tax planning to go through on the way out, but you can leave that country. If you're an American, to fully do it, you need to give up your citizenship, but there's ways you can have asset protection structures. In other countries, maybe just want to leave your country and go and live somewhere else, but there's plenty of countries that don't have an inheritance tax, and heck, while you're at it, may not have an income tax, or may have a very low income tax, maybe a very low corporate tax. There are better places to go, and heck, I mean, how many retired Britons leave and have historically gone to live in Spain? Why don't we go and live in a country with just as nice beaches that don't have an inheritance tax? There's countries in Central and South America. There's countries in the Gulf. There's countries in the Caribbean. There's countries in Southeast Asia that also have very nice beaches. Maybe you aren't quite as close to home, but you don't have the inheritance tax. There's countries in beautiful islands in the Indian Ocean or the Pacific Ocean where there's no inheritance tax. And so when I hear this kind of stuff, listen, I'm all for taxes going down. The inheritance tax, the death tax, is one of the most unfair taxes out there, because look at how many people earn some of the highest incomes in the world. Now, cost of living is higher as well. 3.73% of people accumulate as a married couple working together. People are living into their 80s and even their 90s. The stock market during their lifetime, it was an incredible wild ride. So just for that fact alone, I don't want to give any credence to the government that they're going to come in and save me. 40% is incredible. The money you save that was already taxed at death while you're alive is going to be taxed again at your death, so I'm not waiting around. And by the way, this is a side benefit of citizenship by investment. Caribbean countries don't really have inheritance taxes. Some of them, again, don't have income taxes. St. Kitts and Nevis, for example, it's pretty much tax-free down there. And so you could get the citizenship, and you could set up perhaps an asset protection structure where we start moving assets out of whatever country you live in. You know, there's obviously tax planning that needs to be done on that. If you have assets that are down in value because the stock market's down a little bit lately, or because your crypto's down a little bit lately, or whatever asset you have, maybe you value your business, could you put some of that stuff in a trust, and can that trust then be, you know, flexible, that it works if you ever wanted to move to another country? Now, let's play this differently. Let's say that the UK government inheritance tax is gone, and you would like to one day be able to go and retire and enjoy life in the UK. Prime in the UK is up. The weather's still not that great in the UK. I mean, maybe you don't want to go to the UK, but if you said, okay, listen, I want an English-speaking country. I want the way of life that I have. I want Amazon. I don't want to live on an island. How do you play this? Well, the UK is not the ultimate plan B, and part of it is because they got rid of the investor visas. You can't just move there as an investor. You can't really get a residence permit that gives you any optionality to live there as an investor, and really even as an entrepreneur, even though there are options for a niche number of entrepreneurs. The way that you would gain access, I think, most notably to the UK, if you wanted that option, would be to get citizenship in Ireland. Ireland is part of called the CTA. And so even though the UK is now outside of the European Union, the CTA predated the European Union. Irish citizens can live in the UK. British citizens can live in Ireland. That offers certain benefits, particularly for folks coming into Ireland who want to take advantage of the non-dom system. Now, the Labour Party, which Rishi Sunak's party is trying to get ahead of, have talked about perhaps scrapping the non-dom program in the UK. But you could get Irish citizenship through your family tree. If you have a parent who is Irish, if you have a grandparent who is Irish, you can go back and you can claim Irish citizenship. You don't have to move to Ireland. You don't have to pay taxes in Ireland. You can do that pretty much remotely. And we help people do that. We help people with Irish and Italian and Hungarian. Italian's one of the ones that's going really well for us right now. Greek is also going relatively well. We're getting them done nicely. But there's plenty of countries all around Europe. In this case, Ireland. Can you get Irish citizenship? And if you have that, you could always go and live in the UK if you thought, hey, there is some benefit for me to do that. You could also start a company in Ireland. You'd have 2 years of living there before you could have a certain permanence to your status. And if you spent a couple more years living, you could naturalize as an Irish citizen. They need to live there for a couple more years after that. So it's going to be some number of years of living in Ireland, a decent time of the year. But there are some tax incentives for folks who are moving to Ireland, who are foreigners. And if you got the Irish passport, either way, you'd have the ability to live anywhere in the European Union, which gives you a certain optionality because, hey, go live in Switzerland. They're not in the EU, but you can go and live there. Go and live in Greece. They've got a tax incentive. Italy, they've got a tax incentive. Now, that may not be the tax incentive for inheritance, but that could be a place to go and live for now while you structure your international affairs in terms of inheritance. So I'm giving you a kind of a broad view because obviously when it comes to, asset protection and estate planning, this is not advice you want to get from a YouTube video or from a podcast. What it does show you is if there is a country where you think there could be an opportunity in the future, get yourself access to that country. This is just one of many examples, but it's one that speaks to the fact that I understand some people, they like the quality of life and the understanding of life that they have right now. And if you're coming from the US or Canada or Australia, obviously, the weather's a little bit different in the UK and Ireland. There's a lot more similarities in terms of some of the things that you can do and how you can live than moving to somewhere else. I happen to think I like the countries that are more off the radar. But I think Ireland's a nice place. So if you could get that Irish passport, now you've got the flexibility to go anywhere in the EU, which gives you, planning ability. And you also have that UK access. Those are some things that you can do. But my big takeaway is if you see a country that you think might be going in the wrong direction, how do you get access? And as we said here, it's not always getting access to that country. If there's any country in the EU that you like, any EU passport allows you to live in any other EU country. Same with the Eastern Caribbean states. There's 5 that offer citizenship by investment, 1 that doesn't. You kind of have that access all around. You're seeing more of these blocks, open Balkan to the Balkans. If you're Serbian, you have access to a number of different countries there. And the ability to go and get a job in one of these countries may not be what you're interested in. But who knows what country is going to abolish inheritance taxes next or what have you. There's a specific example of what's happening on inheritance tax. I don't think most Western countries are going to be killing their inheritance tax. I think they need that money. I think they feel entitled to that money. I think that the culture is largely on the side of people saying, give us that money. We got things to do with your money. We've already spent the money in our own minds. They think it's their money. So for that reason, I want to have access to some countries. If you have access to the UK, that's great. If it's through an Irish passport, or if you can get your British citizenship through your parents, sometimes you can do that. Fine, you do that. I'm going to go to the places where they're already not taxing me. And there's a long list of them. Nomad Capitalist helps people not only uncover these unknown unknowns, we have a whole network of people around the world. We are the general contractor, you could call it, for bringing all these subcontractors together and building a plan that helps you with your asset protection. We do have people we can send you to who do estate planning, who do the tax planning while you're alive, who help you get the passports, help you get the residence permits. It's kind of a one-stop shop to connect you with the best people all around the world and to make sure you get the best advice because we don't have any particular dog in the fight. You can learn more about that at nomadcapitalist.com. And if you're living in a country where the estate tax is 40 or 45%, I strongly consider you at least have some other option to make sure you're protected from that.